Thank you, Simon. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I'm a bit croaky, but I'll do my best by sucking something at the same time as I'm speaking to actually keep going for 10 minutes. I speak from 12 years now of working with governments and with the private sector, trying to bring them together. And it had been very clear to me when I was minister at ODA, DFID's predecessor, that unless we got the relationships right for the company, for the government, we weren't going to make real progress. Now, you may say this is very touchy-feely stuff, but I have to say to you that 12 years of experience in the field tells me without it, you make some horrible mistakes, which are much more expensive as a business to cure, and sometimes can actually jeopardize a project. So, naturally, good preparation is the basis of the successful interface of business with the private sector. And if you've got a PPP working, a public-private partnership with an NGO involved, it's even more important that the effective communication and consultation builds mutual trust and respect. There's no question about it, it has to happen. The other thing that I think is fundamental is that every promise made needs to be logged and has to be credible and implemented. Too many times I come across throwaway lines, sometimes from business, sometimes from governments, which actually are not satisfied as far as the local community is concerned. And that's why when we talk about corporate social investment, I believe that without a demonstration that it brings improved social justice and development, local people are not daft. They're actually going to say, what's in it for us? And if you don't actually establish a real bonus for local people, they quite quickly become jaded. One of the things that many companies don't understand is just how much traditional social systems matter, particularly in Africa. Chieftaincies, monarchies, they wield an influence and an authority way beyond anything that's written down. You not only need to get them on side, you need to keep them on side. And land issues and labour issues are absolutely key in this, it goes without saying. Many of these chieftaincies actually control large tracts of land, and they administer them through some rather vague decentralized system. We've worked in the last few years on a big project in northern Malawi. And there, not only have you got to deal with a paramount chief, but you've got to deal with a sort of chief of chiefs, and then the chiefs at a local area. They all had their various clans vying for jobs. They also wanted to know what was in it for them, and at one stage they decided they were going to have a battle between the chieftaincies. Now, the Australian company concerned hadn't got a clue how to deal with the warring chieftaincies, but unless he did it, he was going to have labour problems on the site. In Uganda, we all know of the Kabaka of Buganda, one of the kings. There are others. In Ghana, we know of the Ashanti chiefs, but there are lots of others too. And all over Nigeria, Mali, particularly West Africa and East Africa. But cultural heads matter, and they command a great public trust and loyalty. And that's why getting on side with these people before a project is even started is critical for any business, and it's also critical sometimes for carrying government too. The other thing I sometimes find that business doesn't understand is much of the history of the country in which they're going to work. In Rwanda, we had one client at one stage who really had no understanding of the 1994 genocide. And I thought that nobody could be without understanding of that. I had to go through the bad experience which I had lived through. And the same has happened in northern Uganda, in Darfur. And this is where a good partnership between the private sector and NGOs very often, but also with understanding in government, can actually be part of the healing process that they're trying to achieve in that country. The absence of the rule of law, which is something that investors are quite shocked by occasionally, also requires a very particular relationship building skill. In Eastern Congo, we've been doing some work with DFID in the Trading for Peace initiative. And that is to show companies and local people and the government in Kinshasa, who are not too keen on it, but how the role of trade is very helpful in peace building and poverty reduction. And we are considering at the moment whether to use similar tactics with business people in Somalia, because we have to find ways of breaking the inability to work together. There are also other things that worry many businesses that go in without adequate preparation. And that is the misconception, the misunderstandings, which often occur because of language difference. I say here, simplicity and straightforwardness is truly the key. And a basic knowledge of a common language, maybe a Swahili or similar language, or even Arabic, can be a great bonus. Local officials will often have real difficulties in dealing with the official government language of the country. And time and again, I find you really do have to have people with local language if you're outside capital cities or main towns. Now, there's one other thing that I need to warn business always about, and that is they get very excited about their sales literature. And it doesn't always take account of local sensitivities. It certainly isn't a case that one size fits all. Many years ago, a big company with which I've been long associated had a new advertising plan. And they had a symbol on this. We thought it was a great symbol, but we couldn't understand why certain Middle East countries were worried about it until we were told that if you held the symbol up and you literally turned it round and then put it in a mirror, it said something rude in Arabic. It just tells you how careful you have to be. Let me say, too, that some of the things we take for granted are just so lacking in many of the developments we get involved in Africa. The lack of any skill at all, and the lack of real management ideas, which may exist in capitals, may exist amongst governments, but don't necessarily exist on the ground. So local staff recruitment has to address employment needs. Okay, you can use your expats where there are gaps, but you gain a great deal by training and using your local labour where you can. And the opportunity to give experience of projects to local business schools and to get them to offer a good pool of local middle managers is very important indeed. And one of the other projects that I've been involved in with my company is helping the business schools in Africa to actually have African examples of not the obvious big buck ventures, but the smaller ones that are way, again, outside capitals and so on, because this trains better than any other way I know to have really good examples of the way business really occurs. We all know how much business improves the lives of people in developing countries by increasing investment, creating new jobs, and indeed increasing skills. But I would say in summary that real thorough baseline surveys and preparation is really key. Building up local contacts and making sure they're not at war with one another can save you an awful lot of time and can really make a big difference. And the legal and regulatory frameworks that exist there, even if you disagree with them, which we so often do, but you actually have to understand the way in which people are working in different countries. And here maybe it's a good opportunity just to say to you that, frankly, what you can do in one African country, you cannot pick up and put down in another African country. And the country I have to say that to most often, or to companies, is in South Africa, where people have an awful feeling that they know it all. And I get very bothered when I'm told in another, not too distant African country, "Oh, Linda, take your Johannesburg address off your business card. Be British. We're prepared to have the British help. We don't want the South African help." This has happened more than once, which is why I mention it. Relating to local people and making sure that your local branding and your advertising is appropriate is really imperative. I've talked about cultural sensitivities, but above all, it's building relationships with leaders and local leaders too, and understanding the local systems. That's what makes it work, and certainly being prepared to work at local level makes a very big difference. And some of the successes in Malawi in agriculture in the last 4 years have actually been due to those companies who've gone in and found out what works locally, and then they've worked hand in hand with local people. That's what makes it happen. Thank you.